Autism of resistance. What you resist persists. When you resist your fate or chocolate, it causes a push in your life. Trust and a willingness to work with it instead of against anything or anyone allows you to relax and make the journey through life more peaceful. Nin.
Thank you. So, throughout my life, I've tried to live without resistance by embracing whatever challenges come towards me and dancing with life. Because, as Stacy said, what you resist persists. And when you start resisting things, it automatically leads to temptation and to obsession. And I remember when I was a child, I used to have the responsibility of going to the bakery in the morning to pick up the bread, the fresh baked rye bread for my mother to make sandwiches. And on the way back, I would eat the ends and all those little pieces in the middle. And I just loved that bread. And after school, I'd pick up bagels and they were so hot. They only cost a nickel and it was so hot I could hardly hold them. They were crispy and soft in the middle. And I just loved bread. It was my favorite food. However, as I grew up, I became allergic to wheat. And so I could never eat bread again or it cut off my breathing. And so bread became the big temptation in my life. I would yearn for it. And of course, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And I remember I went to lunch with my sister once, and it was a beautiful restaurant where they brought this hot, fresh baked bread and put it on the table. And I looked at it, so I wanted it, but of course I couldn't have it. But my sister, who certainly could, she didn't want it. I said, why? She said, oh, I'm not in the mood. How could you not eat the bread when I wanted it so badly? And that's when I realized that she didn't care. She didn't have this intense desire that I did, because for her, she wasn't resisting it. It wasn't a temptation. And so she could easily choose one way or the other. And I began to realize that what you resist has this intense pull for you. And let me start this actually. There. How does that go? Share. Okay, good. And I'm sorry. My buttons are missing. Let's see. I have to get this. Oh dear. Ah, there we go. Thank you. Oh, but now I'm missing. Can someone on the other end help me?
Okay. Okay. Do you have, can you open that file in a separate window and then it should be sitting in your share screen?
Okay, here I am here.
Mhm.
And if I hit share, it will go into that, right?
Yeah, share screen.
Okay, there we got it.
Okay,
And
so
now,
go to your file there and open that up. Yep.
okay.
Okay,
then
and then up to the slideshow part.
great. Thank you so much. You're my hero. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
And my apologies to everybody for being so computer illiterate. But back at what I was saying is that once we start resisting something, we automatically give it power over us. We have this push-pull that we have to fight in our lives. And so here we are struggling with wanting something, not wanting it, accepting it, rejecting it. And that creates a split inside of ourselves and sometimes inside of our souls. And it creates this power and this stress in our lives. And so it becomes important to learn how to not resist things, how to work with our desires. Recently, I went to a party and they had this cake. It looked just like this. Fantastic chocolate cake with lots of cream on it. But of course, given my wheat allergy, I couldn't have it. So it was such a temptation. I imagined it being the most amazing cake that anyone ever ate. And the hostess was very nice. And so she made me a little carrot cake because she knew of my allergies. And I ate my little piece of carrot cake. I don't even like carrot cake. And I ate my little piece of carrot cake while everybody was eating these gorgeous big pieces of chocolate cake. Well, of course, I was lusting after it, the temptation of it, the desire for it. And I looked at myself and it was like, what am I doing? This wasn't fun. I was ruining the party for myself. And so I decided to not resist. And how could I find a middle ground between not having any cake and winding up sick? And so I cut a teeny tiny sliver, just a paper thin piece. And my late husband would call it a homeopathic dosage of the poison. And I ate that. And when I did, I realized it wasn't as fantastic as my fantasies. It was lovely. But it diffused all of the conflict inside of me. And I enjoyed the rest of the party. So I began to realize that fighting it causes so much stress inside of myself. And it also, if I hadn't had that piece, I would have fantasized about how much I was missing. And it would have fed the yearning for the next thing. Knowing I could take a tiny bit of it made me give up my resistance, and temptation wasn't nearly as powerful anymore because I wasn't fighting it anymore. And I have a friend who shouldn't eat sugar. And so most of the time she doesn't. But in between times, she binges because the not eating it sets up this big desire in her. And so when she finally does, she really does it. And then one day she said, this push-pull, this not eating it and then binging was really unhealthy for her. And so she stopped and she looked at it and she said this magical question, what do I really need? And when she did that, she looked underneath the desire, underneath the temptation, underneath the obsession, and she looked at what was her real true need and then went and looked for other ways to satisfy that need. And so in that way, she once again diffused the obsession and was able to free herself from her struggle. Because when you're fighting yourself, it divides you and it makes you very stressed and very difficult experience to be in that way. It's like if you eat the little sliver of cake, if you look for the meaning underneath the temptation and the desire and satisfy that, then you're working with the issues instead of struggling. And I started looking, I did yoga most of my life. And so I started to look at yoga as a way out of this push-pull struggle. In yoga, you get into a difficult position and then you get to your limit and you can't go any further and it's difficult. But you don't fight it. You don't resist it. You melt yourself. You relax yourself. And when you relax, your muscles stretch and you're able to go further. And so I looked at that process and I began to apply it to my life, like this liver of cake. I didn't resist it. I relaxed into it and I looked for another way that I could solve my desire, like my friend looking for the deeper meaning underneath. Instead of resisting things, the temptation of things, relaxing into it. And that creates this open space where things begin to change. In my life, I sometimes gain a lot of weight. And so then I go on diet. Now, diet means resisting food. You want to eat this much of food and you eat this much of food. So you're resisting the food and struggling with it. And when you do that, of course, afterwards, you'll binge because I deserve it after I haven't had it for so long. And so it was not a workable system. Once again, the temptation and the resistance. So I began to look at it and I realized that this was very unhealthy and rather depressing. So I, once again, like my friend, tried to look for the meaning underneath it. And I realized it wasn't the food. It was that I didn't have enough exercise in my life. And so then I took that understanding and put it together with my desire for the food. And I realized if I want to eat more, fine, just go and do it. But that means I have to have more exercise. So I tried to create a balance between the food and the exercise by finding a balance in my life, by looking for balance. When I found things I resisted, I was able to find a way to resolve it. Once again, not the fighting of it. And so I was able to move on to another level. And you see, resistance doesn't all only happen in food and breads and cakes. It's resistance in life. And when we don't accept something, when we resist it, when we don't want to dance with life, we want to step back. We're pulling back from our destiny. And there's an energy in life. Plato talked about teleology, that the future calls to us just as much as the past does, and that the future affects us as much as the past. And so it's today where we're constantly having to work out this energy that moves through us every day of our lives, that's calling us, that's leading us to our destiny. And it brings us events and it brings us people that will take us to our destiny. But when we resist the things that happen, because they're new, because they're different. I mean, how are you going to get to your destiny if you don't leave where you are and pass through some new terrain to get to where you want to go? And so if you resist what's new and different, you miss opportunities and you begin to find yourself in a difficult place, because life is cyclical and it'll come back again. Opportunities come back again and again. But if you resist the first time, it comes again, and then there's reluctance, and then again, and it's concern, and eventually it comes to fear. And if you fear the unknown and you fear the things that are coming to you, then that sets up a dynamic in our lives where we miss opportunities. And an untouched opportunity, an unused opportunity, is energy that's blocked. Resistance creates blocked energy. And every time an issue recycles again and again, as they do in our lives, and it meets that blocked energy, it starts causing problems in our lives because it causes the energy to come out in a negative way. And negativity is just as attractive, has just as much attractive force as positive energy. So if you resist, and you block your energy, then as the energy in life moves through you, it comes out in a more negative way, or it comes out and attracts negative things into your life. So resistance causes negativity, and it causes difficult situations into one's life to deal with. Because the opposite of that would be embracing life, receiving life. But when you block it, it comes out difficult, and it brings this difficult situations into one's life. And you miss opportunities. And when you do that, then your life gets more and more narrow, and your destiny becomes more and more narrow. When there's a lot of resistance, it creates a lot of fear. But you know, a lot of fear also creates a lot of resistance. That's a bad little loop there. Resistance causing fear and fear causing resistance. Because what happens is it causes problems in our lives, and it begins to attract difficult experiences, which we, as human beings, we tend to project what we don't feel comfortable with onto other people. And we kind of blame them for what we resist. And you look for a cause, you find a blame, and then we're on this trajectory going towards prejudice and scapegoating and rejecting certain people because they're different. And when we do that, it creates this difficult situation in life where people think there are some good people and some bad people, or some people who are righteous and some people who are not, and some people who are saints and some people who are sinners. And that's where the difficulty comes in, because you find people fighting what they think is bad, but the act of fighting itself in this situation is seeing the devil in the world, fighting the devil in the world, and it makes you do things that are not saintly. If you think a person is trying to hurt you, you defend yourself and might do something to hurt them. In which case, that's the situation we've got on the planet today, that we're trying to shift, we're trying to change. And so the way out of this is to face everything, face whatever comes into our lives, and to look for a way to embrace it and to work with it and hopefully to heal it. And when I looked at resistance and temptation and, of course, obsession, I wondered, were people always like that? And I started looking back in history. And what I came to was St. Augustine. Before St. Augustine, Jesus lived a life that modeled how to live in love and service. And people would try and model their behavior after Jesus, to be a loving source of service to humanity. He wasn't prejudiced. He healed the lepers. He brought women into his congregation. He had no prejudices. He accepted the rich and the poor, the good and the not so good. He forgave Judas. He was this embodiment. He didn't resist. Then, several years, decades later, St. Augustine came in, and his main principle was, you cannot trust your senses. You cannot trust the outer world. We're here as a testing ground to see who's worthy of going to heaven. And so everything in life is a temptation, especially women. And he wanted you to resist the temptation, and that sacrifice would prove your worthiness. It also opened the way, if you don't trust your senses and you don't trust the outer world, it definitely opens a lot of way for abusing the environment and abusing life in general out there. And so all of a sudden, he started creating this good and bad, those who are worthy of heaven and those who are not. And so in this good, bad, push, pull, we wind up with the difficulties, the prejudices, and the scapegoating. And so it wasn't always like that. There's another way to live. And as Scoof advocates always, it's about all embracingness. And even with the issues that come up in our lives, to embrace them, to see each one as a signpost, showing you go this way or go that way. It's a way to look at life and receive everything that scares you as a message, not to fight it, not to go black and white, yes and no, but to go, why is this happening in my life? And what am I supposed to do with this? How can I find the meaning underneath it? How can I face difficult things with a homeopathic dosage of it? How do I work with the world around me? And so we look at life and we see that there are good things in it and there are things that are not good. But in the good, there's some impurities, and in the bad, there's some goodness. And we can find that part. We can bring that part out. We can work with it. We can work with anyone or any situation that comes into our lives and find what is our destiny in it. You know, if you are very, let's say, advanced in consciousness, well, then you get big challenges. Challenges don't come because you're punished or because it's bad karma or because you're not doing good. Challenges come because you need things to push against, to grow, to explore more, to bring out more parts of yourself, to become aware of more parts of yourself. And these challenges in our lives are mirrors that show us what we're capable of. And so resistance blocks the life force. Acceptance and then receiving it and working with it opens us up to greater and greater awareness and capability for greater destiny. I've always thought it's sad that doctors have to always hang out with sick people, or enlightened people have to deal with people who are kind of blind. But that's because we come with the gifts. The doctors, the ones who have awareness, they come with the gifts. And who are they going to give the gifts to? Those who need it. And so what you're presented with are lots of different things that don't fit you or suit you. But rather than resist them, we receive them and we find the message inside of it. And we use it to heal parts of ourselves and parts of each other. Because enlightenment is not a place you reach. Enlightenment is the journey and the process of going to meet life on whatever terms life meets you and working with it to transform it in yourself. So your energy that radiates out to the world is more accepting and more loving. And you work with it in the world to help those around you become more accepting and more loving. And hopefully it's a pebble in the pond that ripples out into the world. That as we don't resist parts of ourselves, as we don't resist parts in each other, as we don't resist the challenges that come to us, we create our world, the world around us, that is receptive and loving. And they go out in their worlds, and they go out in their worlds, and they go out in their worlds. And eventually, I think that the world will change. And we're putting a pebble in. If you put enough pebbles in, it'll overflow. Thank you.